The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities.
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before.
Is this a lawful act?
Good evening and thank you for tuning into the CBS News special in the region. I'm Parker Jackson reporting from Mountnear Global Bay Area headquarters. Tonight, the Middle East is still on alert after a historical week when the United States joined Israel's air campaign to destroy the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. 3 enrichment sites were targeted over the weekend, some hit with some 30,000-pound bombs. The damage was visible from space. This is the Firdos site, built hundreds of feet underground. President Donald Trump tonight now suggests support for regime change in Iran. He waited this weekend to surprise the public and members of his administration. We start with correspondent Abby Jones recapping this weekend's events.
Good evening, Parker. In a sharp turn from diplomacy, President Donald Trump authorized a strike on Iran's nuclear sites, ending weeks of debate and marking deeper U.S. involvement in the Iran-Israel conflict. Though Trump initially sought a tougher deal to replace the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement, Vice President J.D. Vance said he grew frustrated by mid-May, believing Iran was stalling while expanding its nuclear efforts at fortified sites like Fordo.
After conducting the largest B-2 strike in history, the stealth bombers returned to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri this afternoon. The B-2s led a force of more than 125 American aircraft in an operation the Pentagon dubbed Midnight Hammer. 7 B-2s took off at midnight on Friday, headed east for Iran's nuclear production sites, while 7 more flew west on a decoy mission to the Pacific. It was a B-2 head fake, Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane said, to maintain tactical surprise.
A deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa.
The B-2 strike package flew 18 hours to their targets in Iran, refueling multiple times along the way. Before entering Iranian airspace, the B-2s were joined by F-22 and F-35 fighter jets to escort them in a tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization.
The lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well.
A third nuclear site was hit by 24 Tomahawk missiles fired from a submarine offshore.
The Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation.
Satellite images of the deeply buried production facility at Fordow shows holes indicating where the penetrating bombs hit, but damage assessment will take time.
In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon.
Officials don't think a single shot was fired toward the American aircraft on the way in or out, as if Iran's air defenses never saw them. The Iranians have vowed to retaliate and that the attack would have everlasting consequences.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Anything can happen in conflict, we acknowledge that, but the scope of this was intentionally limited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice.
And CBS News was told that U.S. troops across the Middle East were not warned about the strikes in Iran until it was underway, but enhanced protections were put in place in case of Iranian retaliation.
Thanks, Abby. As you mentioned at the end of your report, the United States was worried that Iran would retaliate, and they did end up doing so. The country fired missiles at U.S. military bases in Qatar on Monday and was said to be a retaliation for the American strikes against their nuclear sites over the weekend. Joining me now in Studio 2B is CBS News foreign correspondent Indigo Yeager. Good evening, Indigo.
Well, it turns out Iran did give advance warning before launching its missiles. According to 3 Iranian officials quoted by the New York Times, Tehran alerted Qatar, likely to minimize casualties. President Trump confirmed this, publicly thanking Iran for the early notice, saying it allowed the U.S. to avoid any loss of life or injuries.
It's very interesting, and that tone is surprising from President Trump. What exactly did he say in response?
Trump called the attack very weak, emphasizing that no Americans were harmed and that there was minimal damage. He even suggested that Iran had gotten it all out of their system and hinted that now there might be a real chance for peace.
And not everyone saw it that way, especially Qatar.
Correct. Despite Iran's warning, Qatar's foreign ministry described the attack as a surprise and a flagrant violation of its sovereignty. Qatar also reiterated its warnings about the dangers of Israeli escalation in the region.
And thank you very much, Indigo. Today, President Trump is in the Netherlands for a meeting of NATO allies. The summit is taking place as a federal ceasefire came this week between Israel and Iran and appears to be holding. While back in Washington, the administration is disputing an early U.S. intelligence assessment of the damage done by American airstrikes. According to a CBS News poll out this evening, the vast majority of Americans say Iran having nuclear weapons would be a very serious or somewhat serious threat to both the United States and Israel. Still, the majority of those polled, 56%, do not approve of U.S. military strikes on Iran. Earlier this week, President was in the Netherlands for a meeting of NATO allies, with President Trump arriving here hoping to have completely wiped out Iran's nuclear program and having brokered a ceasefire between the two nations. But new initial intelligence assessments suggest tonight that the nuclear ambitions may have just been pushed back a few months and the ceasefire has nearly collapsed. Correspondent Ed O'Keefe has a look at where the U.S. stands now with the U.S. ceasefire in place.
Just hours after President Trump first announced the Israel-Iran ceasefire, this morning they exchanged fire again, prompting the president to drop a rhetorical bomb as he vented frustration.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
Aboard Air Force One, the president called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to demand peace. He insisted Iran will never go nuclear.
The last thing on their minds is nuclear weapons. They don't even want to think about nuclear. And our B-2 pilots made this all possible.
And clarified he's not seeking regime change in Iran.
But no, I don't want it. I'd like to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. Regime change takes chaos. And ideally, we don't want to see so much chaos.
That the ceasefire appears to be holding at all is a significant accomplishment for the president. He pumped his fists as he arrived at the summit, and on his way here was congratulated by NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte in a text message. He added, "You are flying into another big success in The Hague this evening." That success is convincing most NATO members to start spending more on their militaries. Leaders are finalizing plans to spend up to 5% of their GDP in the coming years on troops, tanks, aircraft, and weapons, and related infrastructure. You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done, the Secretary General added in his flattering text. But as Russia bombards Ukraine, as it did again today, attacking 3 cities, that war remains a big focus of this summit.
And thanks for that report, Ed. Also tonight, CBS News has now learned a classified preliminary assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency has found that Iran's nuclear ambitions may have just been set back a few months because those nuclear sites that were struck over the weekend were damaged but not completely obliterated, as the president has claimed. The White House is now pushing back on these reports tonight, saying that it's flat out wrong and that it's being peddled by a low-level loser in the intelligence community. But one source tells CBS News that these kinds of preliminary assessments are thoughtfully prepared and ultimately tend to hold up. And with all that, we want to thank you for tuning in to this CBS special. Be sure to stay with CBS News throughout the week as we will continue to provide developments on the ongoing situation. We also want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow for CBS Mornings. Reporting from Mountnear Global Bay Area headquarters, I'm Parker Jackson. Have a good night.